got that classic look, that look that just gets better with age, substantial, capable. But it doesn't have that crazy price tag that you see with some of those big name brands. And if that sounds good, well, you're in for a treat, because today we are doing a serious deep dive into a watch that, frankly, is catching everyone's attention. The Ocean Crawler Core Diver.
Yeah, this is a model that, you're right, has been getting a lot of buzz, especially, I think, within the microbrand community. Those smaller independent watch companies that are putting out some really incredible value these days.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we did our homework, man. We went through, I don't even know how many hands-on video reviews. We're talking some of the best voices in the watch world, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Channels like Teddy Baldassar Reviews, Long Island Watch, Rudy Ward, just One More Watch, Random Rob. The list goes on. The Town Watch, Beer and Watches, One More Watch, Please. Not a watch snob.
Watch David.
Watch David.
Big names.
Huge. And, of course, we had to go straight to the source, too. The Ocean Crawler website. So, yeah, you're getting the full picture here.
That's right. And what I think is so interesting is how, across all of these different reviewers, all these different personalities, there's this, consistent impression of the watch. It really says something, about the character, the value that the Ocean Crawler Core Diver brings.
You got it. So, our mission here, plain and simple, is to give you all the need-to-know info about this watch. We're talking core strengths, key features, how does it fit into the whole watch world, right? And, help you figure out, is this the watch for you? All that, without getting lost in, the super technical stuff.
Right.
So, I guess, first things first, right? How did Ocean Crawler even get started? Where did they come from?
Well, they actually came from Rochester, New York. And it's pretty amazing how quickly they've made a name for themselves, especially in that micro-brand scene like we were talking about. I think the consensus is they're really known for building these, super tough dive watches, but with, a definite nod to that vintage aesthetic.
Yeah. No, that retro styling, that's a huge part of their, identity, it seems. From everything I've seen, they're really, embracing that classic dive watch look.
For sure. And their whole philosophy, it really seems to be about creating watches that, they just feel high quality, almost high end, but with, this big focus on reliability, durability, accuracy, and of course, that vintage style. These aren't watches meant to just sit in a box. They're built for people who live their lives. They're out there doing stuff.
I like it. Yeah, so a tool watch with, some serious style points.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, well, let's get into the nitty-gritty then. When we talk about the Core Diver, what are the actual, numbers, the specs, the measurements that, we need to be aware of?
All right, so case diameter is 44 millimeters. Now, that being said, and this is something that, a lot of the reviewers mentioned, the case is designed in a way and the lugs are shaped in a way that it actually wears a little bit smaller than you might think.
Okay.
It's actually kind of similar to the Seiko turtle. You familiar with that one?
The turtle, oh yeah.
A lot of people compare them, which is interesting because the turtle is known for being super comfortable on the wrist, even though it's a larger watch. So thickness is about 15.6, 15.7 millimeters. Lug width is 22 millimeters. Pretty common size. You'll find a lot of strap options there. And then lug to lug, we're looking at 50 millimeters.
Okay. So it's got a definite presence, but that's a good point about the wearability, that smaller wear. That's important for folks to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Now we're calling it a diver, right? So let's talk about those underwater credentials. How deep can we go with this thing?
Ah, yes. Crucial detail for a watch like this, right? So the water resistance is a whopping 600 meters.
Whoa.
Which is 2,000 feet if you're stateside. And here's a cool thing. The Long Island watch guys, they specifically mention that Ocean Crawler actually tests every single watch to that depth.
No kidding.
Yeah, so we're not just talking about theoretical numbers here. Right. We're actually getting that level of quality control, which is pretty awesome.
That's impressive.
Of course, you've also got a helium escape valve.
Right.
At 9 o'clock on the case, for those really serious saturation dives. And then for those who are a little bit worried about the everyday bumps and knocks, this thing has been tested to be shock resistant up to 6,000 Gs.
Yeah, 6,000 Gs. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
That's way beyond what most people would ever experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk about the heart of the watch now. What's ticking inside? What kind of movement is powering the Core Diver?
Right, so inside, you'll typically find an automatic Swiss Sellita SW201. Sometimes you might see an SW201, depending on the specific variation.
Okay.
And these movements, they're really well regarded. They're known to be reliable. They're easy to service. And they're often seen as a really good alternative to like ETA movements, which are, another well-known Swiss movement maker. They operate at 28,800 vibrations per hour. So that's 4 hertz. And what that means is you get a really nice, smooth sweep on that second hand.
Okay.
Which, watch nerds like me, we appreciate that sort of thing.
I hear you. I hear.
Now, these movements also have both hacking and hand winding. So hacking means that when you pull out the crown to set the time, the second hand stops.
Right.
So you can get it precisely synced up.
Got it.
And hand winding, that means you can manually wind the watch to power it up if you haven't worn it for a while, instead of just relying on the automatic winding. Power reserve is around 38 hours. The stated accuracy is plus or minus 12 seconds per day. But, fresh out of the box, it might be a little bit wider than that, maybe up to plus or minus 30.
Okay.
Now, there is a little caveat to this.
Okay.
The GMT V3 model actually uses a Sellita SW330-2 movement. Yeah. Watch David actually pointed this out in his video. And this particular movement is adjusted in 5 positions. So that generally means it's going to be even more accurate than the standard model.
So a solid Swiss-made movement, you got hacking, you got hand winding. I mean, good stuff.
Yeah, very solid foundation.
All right, so, we got to talk about, what protects that beautiful dial, right? What's the crystal situation?
So you've got a sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating. And a lot of the reviewers, just one more watch, they were really praising the clarity of this crystal, exceptionally clear. You can read the dial from all sorts of angles, no problem.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? Especially in a watch, designed for diving. You need that clear visibility.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the bezel. Crucial for tracking time. What are we working with here?
All right, so it's a unidirectional 120-click bezel with a sapphire insert. So not only does that add to the kind of premium feel of the watch, but sapphire's incredibly scratch resistant.
Nice.
You're going to have a hard time messing that up. And on some versions, you actually get a fully luminous bezel using C3 Superluminova.
Oh, wow.
The Town watch, I remember they're really highlighting that in the review. And the bezel itself, it's got these subtle notches around the edge, and it's got this linear groove pattern.
Okay.
All of that is designed so that even if you're wearing gloves underwater, you've got a really good grip.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
You don't want that thing slipping around on you.
Now, what about the main part of the watch? What's it made of? How's it constructed?
All right. So the case is made from 316L surgical grade stainless steel. That's the gold standard for high quality watch cases.
Right.
It's durable. It's corrosion resistant. Super important for a dive watch, obviously. You don't want the thing rusting on you. The finish is mostly brushed, which gives it that kind of tool watch aesthetic.
Yeah.
But then to add a little bit of, class, they've got some polished bevels along the edges.
Okay.
Now, you might also find models with DLC coating. That's diamond-like carbon.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly hard, incredibly scratch resistant.
Sure.
And then if you go to the Ocean Crawler website, you'll see they actually offer some models made from more unique materials, Damascus steel, bronze.
Oh, wow.
So there's some variety there for people who are looking for something a little different.
Yeah, that's great. I like to see that. And, for peace of mind, what kind of warranty do they offer?
They offer a 5-year warranty.
No kidding. 5 years.
Yeah, but you have to register the watch with an authorized retailer. But the Long Island Watch guys, they pointed out that 5 years is that's pretty generous in the watch world.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It really shows that they stand behind their product, adds to the value for sure.
Big time. Okay, well, we've talked about the tech stuff, the guts of the watch. Now let's get to the good stuff, the design, right?
Yeah.
The overall aesthetics of the core diver. What's the vibe?
It's definitely retro 70s styling.
Okay.
It really leans into that era of really tough, really purpose-built dive watches.
Yeah.
And Teddy Baldassare, he actually mentioned this, the case is 44 millimeters, but the shape of it, which like I said before is often compared to the Seiko turtle, that shape actually makes it wear a lot more comfortably, I think, on a wider range of wrist sizes than you might think.
Okay, interesting.
Just because of the way those lugs are integrated.
Yeah, no, the turtle comparison, that's coming up again.
Yeah.
And that's significant because, for the listener, the turtle, that thing is known for being super comfortable.
It's absolutely.
Even though it's a big watch.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. So what about the dial itself? Like, how is that designed?
Okay, so typically you're going to see a stepped minute track. It's got a brushed silver finish, so there's some nice depth and texture going on there. The indices, those are applied, so they're like, three-dimensional markers.
Right.
They catch the light. They're filled with superluminova, so, great low-light visibility. And you usually have a circular date window at 6 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Which keeps the dial, nice and symmetrical, balanced.
Yeah.
Nothing too crazy going on.
Makes sense. And the hands. I mean, the hands, they can really, make or break a watch. What style are we looking at here?
So the core diver often has this really cool combination. You've got a large minute hand that's usually this orange sword style, super legible. And then the hour hand is more of a traditional pencil shape. It's got a pointed tip. And of course, both of them are filled with superluminova. Random Rob, he actually pointed out that on the orange dial versions, the hands often have black outlines.
Oh, nice.
Which makes them, pop even more against that bright dial.
Right, yeah. So orange, and that's definitely a recurring theme.
It is.
What other dial colors do they typically offer?
So, you've got your classics, you got black, you got blue, but they also have some bolder options too, orange, green. Some models even use really unique materials like mother of pearl for the dials.
Oh, wow.
Which adds a nice touch. And Watch David, in his review of the GMTV3, he was showing off a blue variant, an orange brown, a really striking green.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid to use some color, which I appreciate. And on the Ocean Crawler website, you'll see that a lot of their models are actually limited editions. Yeah, so they'll do different colorways, but they'll only make a limited number of each one. I think for some of the versions, it's 83 to 125 units per color. And then for the GMTV3, I think it's 100 pieces per model.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So that definitely adds a sense of, exclusivity.
It does, yeah. And it's catnip for collectors.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Any other cool details about the dial worth mentioning?
Yeah, so they've got the brand logo, the name that's all displayed on the dial. Pretty standard stuff. But some models actually get some pretty unique dial treatments.
Okay, like what?
They have dials made from actual meteorite.
What?
And some that have this really cool ceramic enamel finish.
Meteorite dials, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So what about the case back? What's going on back there?
So the case back is a screw down type. You got to have that for the water resistance.
Right.
And it usually has an embossed design. Teddy Baldassar mentioned one. It was Neptune fighting a kraken. Oh, cool.
And then you've got the engraved serial number there too.
Right.
Just to remind you, hey, you've got a limited edition watch here.
Nice, yeah. A little bit of artwork on the case back is always cool to see.
Sure.
Okay, so how does this thing actually attach to the wrist? What are the bracelet and strap options?
All right, so the core diver often comes on a brushed shark mesh bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
These bracelets, they've got screw-in links, which means sizing them is pretty easy.
Right.
And it's got a 2-button release clasp, so it's nice and secure.
Okay.
And a cool feature of the clasp is it's got this 2-button diver extension. So that gives you about 13 millimeters of adjustment on the fly.
Oh, nice.
Perfect for wearing over a wetsuit if you need to. And then you also have micro adjustment points on the clasp just for, fine-tuning the fit.
Yeah, a diver extension, that's pretty much a must-have for a true dive watch.
Oh, yeah.
So what was the feedback like on the bracelet? Did the reviewers seem to like it? Yeah, the quality of the bracelet is generally considered really good for a watch in this price range.
Okay.
However, there were a couple of reviewers, like Random Rob, who mentioned that the butterfly clasp that you find on some of the mesh versions, it might not be the most practical for serious diving.
Okay.
And then Long Island Watch, they kind of pointed out that, the lack of even finer micro adjustments on some bracelets could be a bit of an issue for people with wrists that fall between the existing adjustment points.
Yeah, so, it sounds like overall good quality, but maybe not a perfect fit for every wrist straight out of the box.
Right.
So what about the other strap options? Like what else comes with the core diver?
So yeah, each core diver usually includes a secondary strap. A lot of times it's a leather strap that's color matched to the watch dial, and they've got signed buckles, the Ocean Crawler logo.
Oh, nice.
And then some models come with like a sailcloth strap, which is super durable, and they often have some like color accents on them that tie into the watch design. Long Island watch, I remember they mentioned one. It was a blue dial variant, came with a brown leather strap with like white stitching. So they're paying attention to those little details, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I like that.
And Watch David mentioned that the GMT V3 models actually come with a Stingray strap.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then an additional leather and nylon hybrid strap.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like they put some thought into those extra strap options.
Yeah.
Which is always good to see. Now, for a dive watch, probably one of the most important features is the luminosity. Like, how does the core diver perform in the dark?
So yeah, luminosity, this is where the core diver really shines.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. So they use either BGW9 or C3 Swiss Superluminova.
Okay.
Both of those are known for like a really long-lasting, a really bright glow. BGW9 that glows blue. C3 that's more of a greenish hue.
Okay.
And some models will actually use both colors strategically. Like you might have, one color on the hands and indices and then another color on the bezel. Reviewers across the board, they love the lume.
Yeah.
Like they describe it as excellent, great visibility in low light. Not a watch snob. He was like really raving about the fully luminous bezel on certain variants, which, I mean, that's awesome for diving.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're down there, in the depths. You need to be able to see that thing. So yeah, strong lume is super important. Okay. So we've gone through the specs. We've talked about the design. Now let's get to like the big question, right?
Okay.
What's the value proposition here? Like how much does the Ocean Crawler core diver cost and where does it fit into the the very, very crowded watch market?
All right. So typically you're looking at around $999 for a core diver.
Okay.
Now, some of the special editions, or if it's got more exotic materials, it might be a bit higher than that.
Right.
But, the general consensus from the reviewers is like, this watch offers a ton of value for the money. They really feel like it competes with watches from like the much bigger, more established brands that are in a similar price range.
Okay.
And that's because of, the specs, the build quality, the finishing. It's all really, really solid. So it's like you're getting those high-end internals, but you're getting them in this really cool, accessible package.
Yeah.
It's high-end functionality without that high-end price tag. That's really the heart of the value proposition here.
Punching above its weight.
Yeah.
That seems to be a recurring theme when people talk about like successful micro brands.
Yeah, totally. And Teddy Baldazar, I thought he put it really well. He said it's a great option for people who they love that classic vintage aesthetic, but they also want, modern build quality, reliable water resistance. They want to wear this watch, every day or actually take it diving.
Yeah.
So it's that blend of like heritage and modern performance.
Love it. Okay, so no product is perfect, right?
Right.
What are some of the like drawbacks, criticisms, or things that, maybe some of the reviewers weren't so crazy about with the core diver?
Okay, so yeah, a couple of things. So the size and the thickness, some people felt like that might be an issue, especially for people with smaller wrists.
Okay.
Now, we talked about how it wears a little smaller than you might think because of the case shape and the lugs, but, it's still it's a pretty hefty watch.
Right.
Random Rob, I think he mentioned it fit his like 7.25-inch wrist comfortably, but if your wrist is significantly smaller than that, you might want to try it on first.
Yeah.
And the fit of the shark mesh bracelet, that could also be an issue for smaller wrists.
Okay.
Not a watch snob. I remember he kind of ran into that. And then there's the lack of really fine micro adjustments on some of the bracelet versions. That was something that Long Island Watch mentioned. It's not a huge deal, but if you've got a wrist that falls right between those adjustment points, it could be a little annoying. And then a couple of reviewers noticed that the color of the date wheel doesn't always match the dial color perfectly.
Okay.
Which, again, not a huge deal, but for some people it's like, they notice that kind of stuff. And then finally, the design itself, with the polished accents, the kind of the multifaceted nature of some of the bracelets, some people thought it was a little bit on the blingy side.
Okay.
So if you're looking for something like super utilitarian, super understated, maybe maybe not the best choice.
Yeah, those are all really good points. Important for people to think about, what they're looking for, what their wrist size is, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that the case shapes kind of reminded you of the Seiko Turtle. Are there any other watches or brands that the Core Diver is often compared to?
Well, besides the turtle comparison, I think a lot of people compare it to watches from those bigger brands, that are significantly more expensive. And that's where that whole value aspect comes in.
Right.
Because the build quality, the specs, they're often on par with those more expensive watches. It's also seen as a really strong competitor within the micro brand space itself.
Okay.
It's offering a similar, if not better, level of quality and features compared to other watches in that price range. And I think it was just one more watch. There might have been a different Ocean Crawler model he was reviewing, but he actually put Ocean Crawler in the god tier of affordable watch brands.
Oh, wow.
Which, that's high praise.
That's saying something.
So yeah, it really speaks to, their reputation.
Totally. And we touched on this a little earlier, but it's a big part of the appeal of the Core Diver. These are limited edition pieces, right?
Yeah, that's right. Those limited production runs for each colorway, that's a big deal. They're not just pumping out thousands of these things.
Right.
So that adds to the exclusivity. And it also means that, for some people down the line, they could be really collectible.
Yeah. All right. So, to wrap it all up for our listeners, what are the key takeaways about the Ocean Crawler Core Diver?
So in a nutshell, it's a really well-made watch. It's tough. It's got that cool retro look. It's got the specs to back it up, with the Swiss movement, the 600-meter water resistance. The luminosity is awesome. And really, the value for the money is a huge selling point. I mean, all the reviewers were really impressed with that.
Yeah.
So it's a watch that it's got character, it's got capability, and it's not going to break the bank.
So here's something to think about.
Okay.
With this whole trend, right, of vintage-inspired looks combined with, modern performance, do watches like the Ocean Crawler Core Diver, do they represent, this sweet spot for watch enthusiasts?
Yeah.
Is this where you find that watch that, has soul, it has history, but it can also hang with you, in your everyday life, even if you're, out there getting adventurous?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And you get all of that, without having to spend crazy money.
Right.
So, maybe it's worth checking out the different Core Diver colorways. Maybe, look at some of the other models that Ocean Crawler offers. See if their whole design philosophy and value proposition speaks to you.
I think that's a great suggestion. We always encourage people to dive deeper into the micro brand world. See what's out there, see what catches your eye. And if you've got any experience with Ocean Crawler or any, thoughts, insights, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
So, maybe do some research on the specific models that caught your attention or even, join some online watch communities.
Yeah.
In those discussions, hear what other people are saying. It's a really fun part of the watch world.
It really is. And, Ocean Crawler, they're definitely a strong contender in that space.
They are.
So, yeah.
Cool watch.
Cool watch. Cool brand. All right, well, that's going to do it for this deep dive into the Ocean Crawler Core Diver. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.